Hello, and thanks for joining me for 11 trends that will shape learning and development in 2024. Hopefully, in the next hour, we'll give you a bit of an insight into what we think are the trends that are going to be forming 2024 in the L&D space. So, to give you a bit of an idea, we've used an analyst, we've been through industry insights, we've gathered data from various sources within the field. We've conducted a thorough review of reports, studies, publications from leading organizations, and observe thought leaders and experts in the L&D space as well. So hopefully we've aggregated this information. We're presenting hopefully a well-rounded and informed perspective of the key trends for the landscape for 2024. And we try to consider multiple viewpoints as well to ensure the information we share is both credible and reflective of the current dynamics in the L&D space. So hopefully this is going to be a pretty nice, entertaining hour to give you some of the idea of what the L&D landscape looks like for 2024. So let's make a start. First off, it's important that you talk to us. I'm sort of here just shouting out loud into a darkened space, into a camera, and you can't quite hear what anybody else is saying. So I think there's any reactions out there, if you've got any thoughts that you might have on anything I'm saying, please pop them into the chat. And any comments as well, we'll try and address them either as we go through today or also at the end, we'll try and pick them up as well. We've also got resources, so there's an ebook for the 11 trends as well that we'll be sharing in the comments where you can download the full guide that we've put together as well, which has got even further information on today. And then if you've got any feedback as well, please let us know if there's something we could be doing different or better. We're trying to be here as a nice and helpful resource for the L&D community, so anything that we could kind of assist with, please let us know. Okay, so making a start into L&D trends. Well, first off, let's have an introduction into myself. I'm Fred Thompson, CEO and founder of First. I used to believe I was young, and now I feel like after doing 20 odd years in L&D, it's less the case. But effectively, my background was software development. I was a developer by trade, so I've still got this kind of background, sort of interest in development, technologies, and all sorts of connected pieces. But it's all been in the sector of L&D, starting life going back to Macromedia Flash before it was even bought by Adobe, sort of building out training platforms in there. We've delivered many training platforms in the businesses that we have and solving many different solutions. So we've generally seen most things there are to see in L&D, and it's quite nice to see that sort of trend progress through the years as well. And I'm generally around on LinkedIn and writing blog posts, talking a little bit about the future of work, anything L&D related, LMS, LXP, learning platforms, and generally tying that back into technology as well a little bit. So hopefully with that 20 years, I can remember something and pull some sort of insights and some thoughts forward here as we go. So let's make a start. Let's go on to number one. Well, you kind of knew it. You knew it was going to turn up straight away on the future of L&D in 2024, AI, automation in the workplace. And I've talked about this many, many times. It won't be a surprise to you that, AI is in this list. So we thought, let's get it in there first. Let's talk about it and get it out of the way from that side. And, there's a FOMO with this at the moment. Everybody's wanting to latch on to the latest AI trends that are there. And you can see some of the statistics that are here. So 68% of small companies, 33% of medium, and 15% of large companies are saying that they're actually using at least one AI technology like recently. But we had reports from AI that it contributed £3.7 billion to the economy in 2022, which was, a year before ChatGPT and all this craze that we're currently in was. So who's to know? We haven't had the report of what that number looks like today, but it's massive in this space at the moment, as in every sector as well. So how can we use it in L&D? Well, there's lots of different ways. We can have a look at it from taking the load off the L&D manager for starters. We can look at automating the workflows for assigning and managing content. We can look at assisting with the curation and creation of content as well, and sort of breaking up existing content, repurposing it into different forms that will hit different learners in a different way. And effectively just trying to streamline and use the AI automation to just make L&D managers and operatives a little bit, their job a little bit easier. But it doesn't have to stop at the L&D manager here as well. So we can take the load off the user. We can use AI to potentially prompt the user to complete learning content at timely points, a little bit along the line of it being surfaced at the right point. But also we can use it to surface relevant information to them as well that they might not have been seen or assigned in compliance. So we can lean on AI to try and drive the learning content to the user that based upon things we know about them. So based upon things that they might have, the previous content that they might have consumed, their skills, the things that might be working towards. So it's interesting, but we can also, I think AI automation is also more interesting that it can trigger a demand for problems that AI can't solve. So there's a lot of fear in the space around AI and about jobs that it's going to replace, but there's still a lot of elements around, critical thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence, that, complex problem solving that we can't actually do that well with AI right now. And I think in the L&D space, there's going to be a little bit more around trying to produce learning programs and courses around teaching solutions and upskilling in areas that AI can't really solve. And of course, with AI, like we said, it's going to replace some jobs, but it's going to create a bunch of jobs as well. So we're going to have new roles, new positions, new skills that are going to be created as part of that. And I think it's L&D's job to make sure, again, we're putting the programs in place to essentially upskill our employees and our team members to be in line and in tune with the latest AI technologies. I know that at the moment I've seen there's whole postings on LinkedIn around things around guides that you can do on how to actually use ChatGPT correctly. And when I think about that, I think, well, that almost becomes a role in itself to actually even use the AI. So I think AI in general, it's going to cross a wide range here, and you can see how important it is to businesses with these statistics. And it'll certainly touch on L&D, and we've got a little bit more about it later on with one of the other points as well. But I think we should try and lean upon it in 2024 in terms of just assisting our whole role and our learners in terms of automating and flowing that through. Moving on, number 2, learning in the flow of work. Now, we've seen this before, and this isn't new, learning in the flow of work. It's not new, but it's becoming ever more important. And again, in the same way we have AI, it sort of helps us out with that flow more than ever before, because we can actually start to produce learning in the flow of work by using the AI tools that are there to do it. Now, there's some nice, interesting points on how to do that there in terms of sort of breaking that up into micro-learning pieces and also, using that AI part to surface that information. But I like thinking about the use cases for learning in the flow of work. And 2 really stuck out to me. One was we had an example of in the hospitality industry where a recent customer of ours had a bar, and they were setting up new cocktail recipes for their staff members. But effectively, they wanted to produce them seasonally, so they were moving really, really fast. Well, you couldn't sit, generally a bar attendee sit down and get them to do that recipe in a very quick speed. But you could get it into a learning platform that would produce that in the flow of work. It's on their mobile straight away. They could be up to speed with the latest cocktail recipes, overnight. But then even if they forget that, that's where learning the flow of work comes in. And all of a sudden, on their mobile device, that can be detected. It could be bringing up the recipe straight away, actually while they're on the job as well. So allowing them to just effectively learn exactly in the flow of the work that they're doing. Another great example that I saw as well, I think it was the University of Bologna had actually set up, I think they were the first in the world to do a surgical operation that include virtual elements. And that was they had sort of got virtual reality goggles on, and they overlaid the 3D image of actually I think it was a biopsy or something similar over the top of parts of the body, and could actually use that, and the surgeon can operate using that information. Now, that's very, very just in time learning in the flow of work, of course, because that's right on that point as you're doing it. But I think it's interesting to think how we can adapt to the ways rather than the old school way of sitting down and doing a training course. It can now be very much on demand as and when you need it. So learning the flow of work, certainly not new, but I think the new tools that we're getting, especially with the AI and how we can set that up, is meaning that it's got quite a bright future into 2024. Okay, number 3, diversity, equity and inclusion training. And there's bias training in there as well, sort of known as DEIB, or how we pronounce it, DEIB. This is just becoming, worldwide, not even just to our sector, very much more important. It's important to us as individuals, but it's important to employees and our customers as well. There's some really, really nice studies and statistics on this. So we're talking about something like 8 out of 10 employees expect their CEOs to do something to address systematic, racism and racial injustice in their business. 40% of employees would actually leave the company if they don't trust it to fulfill the DEI sort of, commitments. over half of employees wouldn't recommend their company as a place to work, if they didn't commit to them commitments either. And even 80% of survey respondents said they would want to work for a company that values these issues. So you're talking about 8 out of 10 people, actually, that's the type of business they want to work for. So I think it's a really key part of L&D that we make sure we put diversity, equity, and inclusion training as part of core principles of what we're doing in 2024. I think we were already heading that way anyway. I just think it's becoming more and more critical. I get quite a lot of emails from sort of thought leaders in this space, and it is a kind of primary topic as we progress through. But there's certain ways we can do that. We're looking at the points here on screen. We have, customized and inclusive content. We can be more inclusive by addressing, a wide range of diversity dimensions in there, genders, sexual orientation, and more. Cultural competency training, help our employees actually understand and appreciate the colleagues and their customers, their diverse backgrounds and experiences as well. That's something, relatively low-hanging fruit from an L&D manager's perspective in terms of setting up that training. But again, it's not commonplace in all organizations and still today. Inclusive leadership development, we're talking about trying to get our leaders to be trained to create an inclusive environment for their teams, recognizing maybe unconscious bias in certain instances and, champion diversity as well within their teams. And also what's becoming more common on there as well, partnerships and external resources. So, we're thinking about you can partner with external diversity and inclusion experts as well, bring them into the business, and actually bring in an increase in the quality of the training program into the organization. It's important that we're measuring impact. So organizations, you don't just want to focus on the quantity. You don't just want to put these into place just because, you think it's right to do so. You've got to sort of ask yourself why. So, I think it's important that you must remember, you've got to understand the why. Why is the organization focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion training, or why is that important to the business? And also, what are the goals? What are we ultimately trying to achieve as well, rather than just, like I said, putting it in place just because. So you've got to work that out with a strategy. You can't just sort of wing this overnight. You do have to work out what you're trying to achieve as an organization. But I think it's really critical part of what is forming part of L&D's requirements now. And like I said, there's another stat there, 76% of employees and job seekers say it's important when considering job offers. So in terms of just attracting new talent and retaining talent as well, it's a no-brainer thing to do anyway, but obviously it has a massive impact as well in terms of keeping your teams together. Okay, number 4, continuous learning culture and organizational agility. Okay, so it's all about recognizing that companies and people, remain committed to kind of growth and developing amid constant changing markets and industries. Continuous learning culture is just putting that thing in your business that's effectively everybody's just constantly learning without having to think about it. The old days of this whole idea of, we still have compliance training, we still have training we have to do as part of the requirements, but that old days of you've been assigned some training, you have to do it now by that week, and it was a page turner and it was boring. It's gone out the window now, and it's a different kind of form of how we present continuous learning into our businesses. So, we're looking at, again, statistics of how important this is. It's making sure our companies can remain competitive throughout as well, but also it leads to a massive decrease in employee turnover as well. So 94% of employees report that they would stay at a company longer if they invested in their career development. So again, it's one of them things, if we can put in a culture of continuous learning throughout our organization, you're going to see that staff retention, staff are being retained longer, and it's less of a problem for the business to attract and retain that talent. We've got other reasons as well. I mean, there's some statistics around the half-life of skills decreasing. It previously used to be 10 to 15 years was the half-life of a skill, was sort of around that time. Now it's just 5. So it means in 5 years' time, the skill that you've got today, is going to be half as valuable as it was when you acquired it. That kind of level is different. It's just moving so fast now that it's so imperative that the business keeps up with that. So I'm starting to think continuous learning culture, it's been embedded more in larger organizations, but I think it's going to become more critical even in the really smaller ones to make sure that it keeps moving the stuff forward. And it's moving and trying to get that information out of the employees' heads and the team members' heads as well, and using that tacit knowledge sharing and just building and baking that in. Some key points on screen here: microlearning, that sort of aligns with that fast learning kind of work environment, enabling your employees to acquire the knowledge faster without disrupting their day. Skill building for the gig economy. We have to look at different ways that now businesses operate. Gig economy is one. We have to teach digital skills, remote collaboration, elements like that. Just-in-time problem solving, just-in-time learning resources. We want to put them in place so they can resolve them at the same time. If we start to implement these items, microlearning and just-in-time learning resources, it fosters that continuous learning culture that you want. And then employee-driven learning pattern. It's so critical to let employees sort of control their own destiny in this environment as well. So they're empowered to actually go and look at the training that they want to look at, build their career pathway and trajectory as well, alongside the compliance and the mandated elements as well. But it's just fostering that idea that people are a bit more responsible for their own learning inside the business. And lastly, one close to my heart because it's development, is the agile methodologies. Works really, really well in software development, and it's all factored around almost the move fast, break things. It's the knowledge that things will change in the agile development world. You're trying to hit the same endpoint, but your path, how you get there, is going to differ. I think the more that gets utilized, and hopefully we'll see that more in 2024, around learning content, especially, making sure you haven't got a course that was built 5 years ago. You've got small elements of learning content that's built up a larger piece that you can change, chop, update, and upgrade as you go. Is meaning you're taking that agile approach at arriving at the same point, but actually it's in a more sort of structure that fits really well for team and members of today. Yeah, that's continuous learning culture. Number 5. Okay, reskilling and upskilling for the future. First off, let's quickly talk about what the difference is between reskilling and upskilling now. We probably know, but upskilling is all about enhancing that employee's existing abilities. So effectively it's teaching them new tricks of the trade. That employee may require brand new knowledge, but essentially, you're trying to say there's still a business need for your role and it's trying to move you forward with the upskilling. And then reskilling is directly in contrast to that. It's a case of, okay, you're going to have to be effectively retrained. You need some skills and some things that you don't currently have that might actually not be relevant to your job role at all. And it might be a completely different job that you need to have. And this isn't new in many regards either in terms of reskilling and upskilling. Skill frameworks essentially have also been a very critical part of the conversation in L&D for the last few years or so. But I think as, again, AI is driving a lot of these changes, you're starting to see it's moving on very, very fast. And as AI replaces roles and brings new roles in, you're going to talk about needing to upskill in existing platforms. I imagine a lot of people here have actually had the scenario where they've had a software piece that has new AI functionality in there that you need to upskill because there's a new feature that you need to work out how to use. But also you may need to be reskilling because of that, because the job that you once had, maybe things like, copywriters off the top of my head are probably the most in threat by generative AI at the moment. They maybe need to be actually reskilling to different areas as well. And we've got more statistics on this. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development predicts technology will transform 1.1 billion jobs over the next decade. It's an insane amount in terms of what that will translate to. So AI and machine learning massively behind this shift, but also, the shift to green tech, pandemic aftershocks as well, they're also influencing the need for reskilling and upskilling. 91% of companies and 81% of employees say upskilling and reskilling training has boosted productivity at work. So again, it's one of them scenarios where it's what we're already talking about, reskilling and upskilling, but I think there's a lot of drivers and a lot of evidence that is pointing to it being very important in 2024. And a lot of the list that we've got on the screen now, which is sort of 9, just gives you a nice headline set of facts in terms of how you can actually start to operate and implement reskilling and upskilling within your business as well. And there's more of that in the ebook as well. Okay, number 6. Wellness and mental health support. Okay, I feel like I'm bombing through these as we go, but there is 11 to get through, so I'll see how we go. We'll start here. I've just got 2 headline facts on this. We all know wellness and mental health support is becoming a lot more critical just generally across the board as well. Some great statistics. 1 in 6.8 people experience mental health problems in the workplace. That is an enormous number of people in that space who suffer from these problems. But also, there's 8 billion is recommended that we can actually save per year in the workplace by better mental health support. So there's there's obviously, if you're talking about, there's a problem here in terms of 1 in 6.8, but there's also an actual reason to solve this problem as well, because it does add a massive benefit to business to be able to solve that, and also personal well-being as well. So moving on to the next slide around wellness and mental health support, we could talk about some of the things as to actually what we might be doing to help out, what you might be able to do for supporting wellness and mental health support in L&D in 2024. I think it's quite interesting to look at some options here. I mean, we've got things like holistic options in there as well. I mean, they can be as wide as, on-site chair massages, for instance, and on-site yoga sessions. But I think it's key to look down the list and sort of look at some of the more simpler things that you can implement. If you're talking about some of the courses, the mental health awareness courses and training that you could put in there as well, quite often, peer support groups, etc. But the emotional intelligence training, I think, is becoming ever more critical. And again, we're seeing more courses and more implementations in this space. But I think it's key to make sure that your teams understand and can manage emotions effectively as well. Massively critical at the moment, wellness and mental health support. The government are putting together a 10-year cross-government mental health and wellbeing plan. We've heard things like in the police force, they have an estimate that 40% of all calls related to those that are vulnerable for mental health and wellness as well. So it's a massive part of our world at the moment. And I think there's key elements we can do. I mean, there's a list of 10 really nice sort of actionable items on there that we can actually look to address from L&D that are really going to start backing into and supporting the wellness and mental health support within the business. And we'll start to see them benefits to the individuals and also to the organization. Okay, number 7. Generative AI skills. I said there'd be another AI one, even though we covered it in point 1. I talked about this before as well. It's always the case. And I semi-joked about AI being a little bit like 3D televisions, in that we all get very, very hyped and very, very excited about them, and then they just disappeared. And maybe AI will do the same. I don't actually think it will. I think it will stick around. But I think the point I was trying to make about this is there's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, but I think the actual use cases are still being found at this point in time for generative AI. So when we're looking about what we can do here, we have to be careful. We have to always map this back to its results, a results-based business. And we're looking at achieving objectives in L&D. That's kind of what we're always aiming to do. So it's no good just putting generative AI in for AI's sake. We've got to be making sure it's actually giving us a benefit. It's increasing, the learning for our learners, or it's making our job a little bit easier along that. And there's lots of other elements at play when we talk about generative AI in L&D, making sure the integrity of that data, making sure it's factually correct, making sure there's no compliance issues or, data privacy issues as well in there. So it's not quite as simple as just sort of implementing this and throwing it into the space. But again, we've got some nice examples here of where it has been used in generative AI. Where I found it really, really useful has been around, I've seen it greatly used where it answers questions. The sound may have changed. Does the sound okay now? Just about. Yeah. Am I back on? Yeah? Okay. Apologies about that. I've no idea. My camera just decided to die on me, so we'll move to a different camera. Nothing like live LinkedIn live for you, is there? He's back. Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so answering questions and learning platform I found very, very useful in terms of it's assisting team members. It's producing that learning content, putting it into the platform, but then allowing it to assist with the answers for that. So where it might take your staff policies, if someone asks a question and says, what's the policy for a shared parental leave for someone who's only been here 3 months? Generative AI can be used to build up that kind of answer to kind of give you, a relatively generated answer, but based upon the content that you've got. So I think that's quite an interesting way of doing it. We've also seen AI build simulated environments as well, where AI can effectively like role play for you as well. So I've seen an example where you can actually use it to be the interviewer. So it can interview the candidate or interview the person. So we can start to use that to assess individuals as well for their individual training. So there's quite a few different approaches. Generative AI can also be used for personalized training. So it can start to form recommendations based upon what training you might want to undertake after this point in time as well. And also it can sort of facilitate group projects and discussions and problem solving with collaborative learning as well. So I think the key bit for me for generative AI, I think, is just to make sure that we're really thinking about where the L&D objectives are. So I think it's quite easy to run at this, to have the FOMO, to want to put this into place as quick as possible. But I think we should always be pinning that back down and thinking, actually, what are we achieving for our end learners? How can we use it best? And I think looking to automate a lot of our processes, assist us as we go, I think will ultimately lead us forward. I think that'd be great for 2024. We'll see how this space works out. I know it's an ever-moving, fast space. Just to make sure we're all still back in. Am I still here on this? Can everybody hear? Yeah. Am I still there, Taryn? Do we know? Yes. Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much. Sorry, apologies. Right, okay, moving on. Personalized learning experiences for employees. If you can move us on to the page. Yeah, okay. This is my explanation of this. Is always I explain this as the Netflix of learning. I think it's a term that people don't really like, but I think it explains it really, really well. I think it's around personalization when you don't really even realize that the environment has been personalized for you. So I think we're thinking about Netflix. Quite often you'll get recommended a crime drama and you might not even realize you like crime dramas, and then you're recommended another one because you've watched something. I think we want to utilize that personalized learning, and we should see this more in L&D at the moment around just effectively upskilling and bringing and surfacing the content based upon what you've currently interacted with. So it is that Netflix sort of approach. You can see the items on here: micro-learning for personalization, multimodal learning experiences, gamification. So if we're talking about micro-learning and keeping them as smaller elements, you can effectively break that down into smaller items that are easier to personalize, easier to surface to individuals. And then multimodal learning experiences is all about producing slightly different content in different forms and allowing you to personalize that. So you might get content that's actually in a video form or a blog or a podcast, and actually people interact with it in different ways and tend to sort of adopt that content differently. We can use that with personalized learning as well. So it's moving away from that forced page turner kind of compliance sort of issues, but we're also then talking about, factoring in things like tacit knowledge sharing, user-generated content in there as well, community-driven learning, anything we can do that feeds in to a wider picture in terms of producing a personalized learning experience, and one that isn't just driven from the L&D sort of manager or creator's point of view. It all promotes that high engagement. It all ensures that our learners are actually getting the most value out of it. And it forms back again that sort of ongoing, company-wide learning experience as well. And it should be the learning platforms and systems we put in place should be the platform that your staff actually want to go to, because that's where they get the information from. And personalized learning experiences is an ideal way of implementing that. Number 9, soft skills development. Okay, soft skills development we've had for ages. We know about soft skills; they're all everywhere that we go. But I think there's going to be more importance placed on this in 2024, and it does link us back a little bit to the wellness and mental health support side of this, that focus on that first point there on emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence training has that big impact on collaboration and leadership and, just simple team dynamics. And these are sort of soft skills that they're not necessarily forgotten, but I think quite often they're just sort of supplementary to what we're doing. And I think they're going to start to play a larger part of 2024 going forward. On there as well, we've got resilience training. We know now, like we've just evidenced by the fact my camera dropped off and I had to deal with multiple things. There's so many more things in our world now, distractions, things we have to kind of deal with and react really, really fast. And I just think it's going to be more important for the resilience training to make sure that people are, actually adept at navigating the uncertainty, maintaining that positive mindset. And that effectively all becomes part of soft skills and does connect back to wellness and mental health support. But I also think, finally on this, I think there's going to be a shift around these soft skills forming part of the metrics and feedback into performance management as well. So I think quite often when we're talking about performance management, it does sort of go back to, did you achieve that number? Have you passed this test effectively and items like that? Whereas I think soft skills metrics and sort of that empathy, that team dynamics, that emotional intelligence piece is going to form part of that larger piece of that performance management process and including them as part of each individual learner's sort of professional growth as well. So nothing new in terms of soft skills in general. They'll play a massive part as ever. But I think the soft skills that we'll need to make sure that we empower our teams with is going to become ever more important. And I think it's going to start forming a larger and wider part of that performance management process. Number 10. Just let me get a cup of tea as we go. Data-driven learning and development. Okay, so we see already a shift to this across the board. But again, I think this is going to become more critical. In my 20 years again here, I've seen a lot of just tracking. Did we do something? Yes, great. Did we get a pass or a completion or a fail? What time did we do it in? And also I used to see a lot of stakeholder reporting back to say, what's the engagement on our platform? And L&D would typically say, oh, great, we went up by 5% of logins last month. And that's not real data, is it? That's just the data we had at that point in time. It doesn't actually mean that much if we're just talking about logins with it. So I think when we're talking about data-driven learning development, this approach, it aims to enhance the effectiveness of training programs on the screen here and empower individual learners. But it aligns L&D with that broader organization goals. And it's trying to get this back down to what are we trying to achieve and how can we use the data that's there to help us achieve it a little bit differently than we do currently. So moving on to the next slide on this, I think we already have a shift to business intelligence dashboards in here. You're seeing that we're not just monitoring that basic data, but there's going to be a more focus on trends, gaps, sort of drop-offs inside of there as well. So the first bullet point on there is predictive analytics for skills forecasting. We're talking about trying to identify a trend, trying to identify where an interest in a skill is peaking or it might be dropping off. L&D teams can start to use this to identify if there's no content in a certain subject area that they didn't anticipate they needed. They can start to see that trend with the analytics and map that back. So I think the AI is making this all possible. It was always possible manually, but it was a really time-consuming job to do. So now you're starting to look at business intelligence dashboards doing this, graphing, charting, segmenting the data. You start to see how possible it is to actually just map that data back, get some really good analytics and statistics out of that, and move forward with the predictive element of this. We're also looking at integration with HR systems as well. Again, we already integrate with HR systems. We know this, but we're seeing more in terms of it being fed back to the systems in terms of the response on L&D. So previously it was, you have a user, let's add them on the HR system, and then they'll be provisioned into the L&D space. Now it's a case of, okay, they've completed a course on the L&D system. How do we get that back into HR and feed that back into 360 feedback, performance loops, etc.? So we're seeing more of that full circle data going back into HR platforms as well, and it becoming a little bit more adjoined as well. So it's more of an iterative approach to what we currently have. We do currently have HR integrations, but I think it's going to see more progression and more data sync between the two. And I think just more integrated in, and learning analytics dashboards, everybody loves dashboards, but I think I have a bit of a dream, which is I think L&D should be looking at trying to solve problems that inform business decisions. And we quite often sort of talk about headline statistics that we report back, but I want to see it where we're identifying opportunities within the business, for change, improvement, or even additions to that bottom line to identify skills we didn't know we had in the team, or product opportunities that we didn't know in that space, being able to actually impact the business at a wider level than we have before. And I think the data-driven approach to this is going to be pretty critical, because before, like I said, we were dealing with, did they complete this, yes or no? Now it's going to be a case of we're starting to look at trends and put some predictive analytics to it as well. So data-driven, pushing forward, it won't just be 2024, but I think it'll start to see a really big uptick next year. Number 11, you notice there's 11. We threw a last one in, and it's largely a little bit of a cop-out because it's largely one of my opportunities to sort of shamelessly upsell our product that we have. But I'll sort of touch away from that, from the growth of LXPs. I think we use LXPs generally here in our phrasing. I think we're mainly focused around sort of the experience of learning experience platforms in terms of what they produce on top of LMSs. I think we've moved away from the concept that you'd have an LMS and you put an LXP on top, and the concept of them being almost different things. But we're moving into this world where functionally LMSs, the functionality is there, it's compliance, it's reporting, but actually the LXP layer on top, where we're talking about, like we just talked about, analytics and that data analysis, but we're also focusing on collaborative learning, that personalization element on that whole great user experience, which is not always the case on every user, on every LMS that we have. So I think we're looking at that, and then also empowering our teams to actually tacit knowledge share, share the knowledge in their head, collaborative learning, to throw that out there into the team members as well, and support rich learning content. We've gone past the days of SCORM, we've gone past the days of the page turners. We're more in the world of, here's a quick video, here's a quick image I've seen, a blog article, that pushing that content throughout. So I think where I'm sort of jokingly saying the growth of LXPs, because it's a shameless plug for what we do, I think it is more focused around a move away from what is the more rudimentary, compliance-led, very focused, very kind of dry learning platform of an LMS, and more into that more engaging platform that you want to go on all the time, because that's where you learn your information, but also it's where you share your information with others as well. So I think we're going to see more of that in 2024 as we progress forward. And I think that just gets about to the end of the 11, other than the questions, which is what happened to your camera, which I don't quite know what happened. What questions do we have? I think Taryn behind the scenes has probably got a few bits and pieces that he can bring up, hopefully. While the mental health is important, however, when people are working remotely, it can be a challenge. Yeah, it really can. And it's a challenge within our business as well. We operate in an environment where actually we don't force anybody to be in work or to be in the office. We're very flexible in that regard. And we try and put a lot of things in place in terms of just opportunities just for social meetups and to try and interact. But it is always a challenge, which is why I think, it's one of the key points for 2024, because, I think we're going to start to see that having more of an impact on society in general, as there is a little bit more isolation than there was before. And I think you've got to be able to get that out. So yes, putting a yoga session in the office isn't going to work if you're working remotely, but being able to sort of understand how people operate, putting training programs in that support it. And then even simple things work as well, allowing, and this is less L&D, it's probably more HR and driven business process, but things like just making sure there are set policies in place for this, or making sure we have cut-offs at the end of the day. People aren't responding to emails at a certain time. So even if they're working from home, you can set up a system that actually people can shut off properly and are not expected to reply. And that all comes from policies, comes from management throughout. But I think these procedures and processes you can put in place that will really kind of impact. But I definitely agree it's a bit of a challenge as we go. Soft skills are going to be a huge part of the workplace as Gen Z start to make their way into the workforce. I was in the public school sector during COVID, and these students are now just entering their first careers. They've missed 2 to 3 years of integral soft skills while learning at home. Yeah, there's some, I haven't got the stats on this, but there's some great studies around where people, on a really simple basis, there's not really work skill related particularly, but where people generally meet their wives or their husbands or their partners or whatever that might be, they tend to meet them during the sort of first few working years of their life, and they tend to meet them in offices, and that's because what they do is they spend a lot of time. And their career growth is very much a curve that is based upon them first few years in terms of your growth and development, being in the business, being sort of present and showing up. Quite often, because Gen Z, the youth of any society has generally got less ties and can put more into it effectively in their early years. And I think you're right, especially with us not being on site. I think it's going to be a challenge to make sure that everybody is still benefiting all in ways, building relationships, networking, and building their careers up as well. But even just on a soft skills basis, people have got used to operating in a world that's very different in terms of operating with mobile phones and tablets and responses like that, and not dealing with that more impersonal side of it. I don't think it's a complete Gen Z problem. I think it's wider than that. I think it's probably going to become a bit more integral as that Gen Z start to be, entering their first careers. But I think, it's certainly a key part is to make sure we are encouraging soft skill development as we grow on, and not actually. I feel like sometimes soft skills are a little bit dismissed in sort of training element, because it's just like, oh, they've got this kind of leadership as a soft skill, and it's very broad and it doesn't really count for anything. But actually, I think that training, especially for the younger generation, is going to come really strong. Do you have a cheat sheet of all the trends listed on one doc? I'm glad you asked, Teresa. Yes, we do. We have a ebook, which is the link is in the comments, I think, to this. And there's lovely. Just turn up to grab a copy with a nice arrow pointing down. So we have an ebook with everything there. There's a little bit more detail in each one as well, in terms of action points and what you can do alongside the statistics as well to back that up and what we've put together. So hopefully that'll be some use. I've kind of covered it in broad brush today, but there's more detail in there if you want that. Any more questions? Doesn't look like any more questions. No problem. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully it's been of use for the 11 trends. Sorry for the technical hiccup in the middle. I'm glad we had a backup camera in there just in case. Like I said, please get the ebook, grabbing the copy below. I'm on LinkedIn as well if you kind of need to want more of what I write about on the blog side of it as well, from this L&D and technology kind of side of things as well. And like I said right at the start, if you've got any feedback, any questions and comments, please leave them as well, and we'll look to get back to you. Thank you very much.